Over the past couple of years, I've read and summarized over 100 different books on this channel. And the most common question that I get is, how did you do that? Today, I'm going to show you exactly how I've done it. And the first thing we're going to point out is that online, you're going to see a ton of different speed reading techniques. You're going to see reading training programs. And I even once upon a time saw someone trying to say that you don't even need to open up a book in order to understand its contents. That's not what we're going to be talking about today because honestly, some of the reading techniques might be helpful and you can certainly get better at reading with some practice. I don't really have a comment on the last one, but what's really blocking most of us from reading more and reading more of the books that we want is procrastination. And that's what we're going to help you overcome today. What I've got here are essentially different ideas that I pulled from some of the books we've read on the channel. The first one is that often we see procrastination kind of as a personal failure. And inside of his book, The Procrastination Equation, Pierce Steele tells us we shouldn't see it that way. Instead, we should think of procrastination as being able to be broken down into this simple equation. Can I go back? Okay, I can. Okay, I'm going to start over. 1, 2, 4, 5, 6. Over the past couple of years, I've read and summarized over 100 different books on this YouTube channel. The most common question that I always get in the comments is, how did you do that? And today I'm going to show you exactly how I've done it. Online, you'll see different speed reading techniques and you're going to see reading training programs. I even once upon a time saw someone trying to say you don't even need to open up a book to understand its contents. And quite honestly, that's not what we're talking about here today. Some of the reading techniques might be helpful, and you can certainly get better at reading with some practice. No comment on the last one, I don't think that's actually the truth. But what's really blocking most of us from reading more of the books that we want to read, I believe, is procrastination. And that's what we're going to talk about overcoming today. I've got 6 different ideas from 6 different books that I pulled out to help you overcome your procrastination and do more of the reading you want. So stay tuned to the end of this video. If you're interested in the 100 plus books that I've done summaries on, you can see them all inside of this personal development AI graph. There's 600 different ideas and over 100 different books on the YouTube channel available. If you want direct access to this tool, you can click the first link down below in the description or join the YouTube channel to be able to get full access to the tool. And with that, let's talk about the very first idea that I pulled out. This is procrastination isn't a personal failure. And inside of the book, Procrastination Equation, Pierce Steele tells us that we shouldn't see procrastination as our own personal failure. Instead, we should be thinking of procrastination as a simple equation. And we're going to use this to get us started with our reading. Expectancy times value divided by impulsiveness times delay is the procrastination equation that Pierce Steele is going to lay out for us here. That's the procrastination equation, inspired by the common elements that determine when we procrastinate and crafted together from the most deeply researched elements of social science's strongest motivation theories. The procrastination equation accounts for every major finding for procrastination. As the deadline for any task gets pushed further into the future, delay increases, and our motivation to tackle the task decreases as well. Impulsiveness multiplies the effects of delay, so impulsive people feel the effects of time far less acutely, at least at first. Consequences have to be on the doorstep before they start paying attention to them, unless they are particularly large. And what makes the consequences large? Expectancy and value. The bigger the payoff and the greater the likelihood of receiving it, the sooner it will capture your attention and you'll overcome your procrastination. So what I really love here is that this psychology and all of this research on motivation can be broken down into a simple equation, a mental model that we can put into our own lives. So let's look at each piece individually here. Expectancy is how confident are you in your ability to create whatever it is you aspire to create. We're going to talk about this a little bit later in the video, but it's really important to even know what you want to get out of the reading in order for you to feel like it's worthwhile to read the book. Same thing with the value. Does whatever you're trying to create have real value and meaning to you? That's another piece. We want to know why we're reading something. That's why it can often be so hard when we are taking a class that maybe we're not interested in. We are reading a book on a recommendation that we didn't find ourselves and we don't really love the material. It can be a lot harder to read those books than it can be to read something that we're really interested in, something we're going to tackle a little bit later. Impulsiveness, are you easily sidetracked via immediate gratification? We're going to talk about some things that Cal Newport has to say and how we can overcome that piece of immediate gratification. And then delay. How far in the future is your deadline? Are you reading for no particular reason at all? Can you read the book at kind of whatever pace you want? This is where things like book clubs or projects or things like that really come into play. So how do we optimize for the future, you might ask? We want to increase our expectancy and value. So we want to pick the types of books that we feel like are going to move us towards what we truly want out of our life. We'll talk about that a little bit later. We're going to decrease impulsiveness and delay. And those are some of the main things we're going to be focusing on for the rest of the video, is just increasing our expectancy and value of the books we're trying to read, and then decreasing our impulsiveness and our delay going forward. So the next piece we're thinking about here is just thinking about kind of, okay, we've got the equation, we've got the ideas that we're trying to really increase what we essentially want out of the book or what we think we're going to be able to get out of the book. And then the next piece that we're thinking about is what Nirial points out in his writing, that there's kind of this piece of the equation that we might miss if we're only focusing on the equation. I think this is a really important piece. So distraction is inside of his book, Indistractable, the difference between reading and watching Netflix, right? So traction is reading and watching Netflix might be distraction. And often it doesn't feel like it, but sometimes we're making a conscious choice to be distracted. And we're really avoiding something by procrastinating. So the quote goes like this: imagine a line that represents the value of everything you do throughout the day. To the right are the actions that are positive, and to the left, they are the negative. On the right side of the continuum is traction. Remember, we talked traction is reading, which comes from the Latin trahere, meaning to draw or to pull. So we can think of traction as the actions that draw us toward what we want in our life. On the left side is what we would call distraction, the opposite of traction, derived from the same Latin root. The word means drawing away of the mind. Distractions impede us from making progress towards the life we want, and all behaviors, whether they turn towards traction or distraction, are prompted by triggers, internal or external. So we're not going to double click on that. What we're thinking about here is that oftentimes we're choosing distraction. We're feeling maybe stress, we're feeling maybe fear of failure, we have like low mental energy potentially. And those are all things that we're kind of feeling in the background. And what distraction is it's covering it up. It's opening up a new browser window, and we don't have to pay attention to that particular feeling or that particular kind of thought that we might be having. But when we're truly trying to focus, when we are truly trying to kind of gain some traction and start reading and really kind of do any activity that's trying to better our life, what ends up happening is those emotions start to kind of surface, and they're a little bit harder to look away from when we're not being distracted and we're trying to get into traction. So that's something that we want to think about, is like, am I choosing distraction for a reason? Am I feeling potentially stress? Am I feeling fear of failure? What are some of those things that are coming up when I'm essentially going out to gain traction, going out to read and etc.? And one of the core tools that I'll just point out here for kind of this understanding why I'm tending towards distraction is actually cutting out all distraction and traction, period. So you're looking at quiet time. And quiet time for me is essentially taking some time away from everything. Maybe I'm laying down on the couch. Maybe I'm sitting on the couch. Maybe I'm drinking a coffee, which is one of my favorite ways to take it. And essentially, you're ignoring everything and you're just watching what comes up. Are you noticing some stresses, some repeating thought patterns? Those are going to make it so that you tend towards distraction. And the best way to essentially conquer those things and essentially conquer your tendency to lean towards distraction is to keep up that practice of quiet time, to notice those things, to watch them and kind of let them float away like the clouds that they are. So the next piece we're thinking about here is getting actually into kind of, okay, what are some habits to get us to read a little bit more? So we've got Jim Quick. Jim Quick is probably one of my favorite authors on reading and learning and memory. He's got so much great stuff inside of his book, Limitless, which we're going to do a review on here quickly. But one particular thing I wanted to point out is what he calls the faster model. And specifically, we're focusing on F for forget and E for enter. So let's look at this a little bit here. F is for forget. And the key to laser focus here is to remove or forget which distracts you. So the way that I go about kind of F is for forgetting. Before every mind map or while I read, I do two things. Number one, and most important, is that I turn off my phone and all applications on my computer because, again, we talked about distraction. Distraction is much easier than traction. So we need to put barriers up against the things that tend to make us fall into distraction. And then the second point is that I set a 30-minute Pomodoro timer, and I haven't seen this talked about that much in the YouTube universe, but that signals my mind to focus on the task at hand, right? So I've got a 30-minute timer going, and when I have that timer going, it's much easier to put everything out of my mind that isn't focusing on the reading or on the note-taking. The next piece we're thinking about here is E for enter. What's the simplest and most powerful personal performance tool? That's your calendar. We enter important things on our schedule. Do you know what a lot of people don't schedule? Their personal growth and their development. And if it's not on your calendar, there's a good chance that it's not going to get done. So the way that I do this, these videos, perfect example of entering. Each week, I'm committed to you to making at least one of these videos. And not only do I put that in my calendar, but something really good is to enlist the help of others. I've got an audience of 15,000 people that is looking for the next book, and it's harder for me to rationalize not doing it because you're all waiting for it. So I really recommend, even if it's just a blog, even if you just have 15 readers and you're doing some kind of a book summary or studying or things like that, build in public. Put your stuff out there because not only does it have the effect of potentially, hey, turning into a nice little business one day, but it also has the effect of potentially making it so that you're actually having a group of followers who are helping you stay a little bit more accountable. So that's something that I would think about for you. And I would say, hey, how do I set this up in my calendar and maybe enlist the help of some people online or in person? That's where things like book clubs and things like that can be very helpful as well. And if you can't find one of those things, a good way to do it is to be the person that's creating the book club. The next piece that I wanted to highlight about just making time for reading, I really love what Jake Knapp and John Jaworski have inside of their book, Make Time. They talk about 4 different steps. And the 4 different steps are essentially to highlight the most important thing for your day. And for me, reading is a very important part of my day. And I think that's what ends up happening is we focus on a lot of different things. And there's so many different things going on in our life that reading can often feel like an afterthought. So I think the piece that we want to take away here is to highlight reading and realize that even though reading might not be a major takeaway, it might not be a super key thing for today, over the long term, reading more and learning more is going to make the rest of your life and the rest of your whatever you're trying to accomplish much, much easier. Laser, we've got eliminate distractions, which we talked about with Jim Quick. Energize, do things to keep your energy levels throughout the day. So for me, reading late at night, not a good idea. My energy levels are really down. Right after I've done my first workout in the morning, I've had a cup of coffee, I've drank some water. Reading, that's a good time to do it then. Number 4 is to reflect, check in, and get a little bit better every single day. I really like the tool that Marcus Aurelius has for this. He talks a lot about essentially just a little bit of a journaling practice. Essentially, what didn't go so well today? What did go well today? And then what might I do next time now that I know those 2 things? So that's a good little journaling practice. For example, What didn't go so well today? I didn't end up reading today. What did go well today? I spent some time listening to a podcast. What might I do going forward? Potentially, instead of a podcast, I would listen to an audiobook. The next piece we're talking about here is declaring war on procrastination. So Cal Newport, famous for popularizing deep work and really just like setting the productivity world on complete fire with that one. But before we can even get into deep work, Cal gives us his method for declaring war on procrastination, which I think is really, really useful. So let's look at it here. Over time, these extended responses began to paint a clear picture. When the straight A students answered, "I don't defeat procrastination," they really meant to say, "I don't defeat the urge to procrastinate." And this makes perfect sense. To put it simply, some work just plain sucks, and you, like a straight A student interviewed in this book, will want to procrastinate on this sucky work. It's unavoidable. And we're going to kind of contrast this a little bit later. And should we be spending a lot of time doing work that we feel is sucky and unavoidable? But this one is for those of you that are studying and those of you that are kind of having to read things that might not be the most interesting to you. Therefore, the goal in this step is not to teach you how to love all the work and never feel like procrastinating ever again. Instead, I'm going to describe some targeted strategies to help you sidestep this unavoidable urge when it arises, not destroy it altogether. This is how straight A students prevent procrastination from destabilizing their schedule. They don't rely on willpower and good intentions, but instead they deploy an arsenal of specific tested rules that help them short circuit their natural desire to procrastinate. These students, of course, aren't perfect, and they still occasionally put off work for no good reason. Again, coming back to kind of what Neer is saying, that it's not a personal failure if we do procrastinate, something very important to keep in mind, because it kind of creates a cycle if we do feel it. But overall, their strategies made them significantly more effective at following a study plan than their peers, and this made all the difference. So this part of the book, like I said, is declaring war on procrastination. So we've got 5 different strategies to win the battle here. Number 1 is to keep a work progress journal, and each morning write down what you plan to get done. This is highlighting by Jake Knapp. And feed the machine. How can you get to work if you don't have energy? Same thing. We need some energy, right? Make sure that you're doing it first thing in the morning, potentially eat healthy food, get rest, etc. Make an event out of the worst tasks. So for example, do you have something that you just don't like to do? Make an event out of it. Cal talks about going to a coffee shop if you don't like doing slideshows. If you're studying a boring subject, go study in the park, and make it a little bit fun and exciting and something you can look forward to, which I think is just like really helping you kind of limit that second part of the procrastination equation. Build a routine. This one is self-explanatory and super important when it comes to reading. 15 minutes in the morning consistently is much better than 2-3 hours on the weekend, because you're going to be able to be consistent with the morning one more often than you would be on the weekend one. So for me, you generally want to be first thing in the morning, and I think that's probably the same for a lot of us. The next piece as well is like choose your hard days. And to me, the way that this works for reading is some days you want to read Joseph Campbell, The Hero with a Thousand Faces, a difficult book to read potentially. And then other days you want to read something that is a little bit easier for reading, and you just don't really feel it, but you want to keep the habit up. And I think that's very important as well. So we talked about kind of declaring war on procrastination, and I think that's a really good piece, because sometimes we do have to read things that we don't want to read. But inside of their book, How to Take Smart Notes, Sonke Ahrens essentially lays out, okay, Nicholas Luhmann, one of the most productive people of all time, founder of kind of the Zettelkasten method that a lot of my note-taking is based on, he says that I never force myself to do anything that I don't feel like. And whenever I'm stuck, I do something else. And I think this is really important. Maybe you have multiple different books on the go, something similar to what I do. I've got multiple different books on the go, and if I just don't feel like it that day, instead of doing The Hero with a Thousand Faces, I read something a little bit easier, like something from Jim Quick or something like that, potentially. So I think this is a key piece to procrastination that we can't miss. It's important to know the equation. It's important to know kind of the antidotes that you can have to the procrastination from above. But if you're reading something that you don't love and you're not following your bliss, as Joseph Campbell would say, these techniques are going to be band-aids, and you're going to constantly struggle with reading. So I think something very, very important here is to think about kind of what Nicholas is saying. I never force myself to do anything that I don't feel like, and whenever I'm stuck, I do something else. So that's what I'm thinking about here. Have multiple different books on the go, be studying multiple different subjects, and follow what you're interested in. And that's the really important piece is don't pick up a book because someone recommended it to you. Pick up a book because you read the first two chapters and you thought it was very interesting, and keep reading. Don't pick up a book and read the first two chapters and don't be interested in it and try and follow it all the way to the end. That's not going to serve anyone because you're not going to remember it, and you're also likely not going to finish it and get stuck on it for a very long period of time. So that's kind of what I'm thinking about. Like, only read what you want. And when you're feeling a little bored on something, don't throw it away completely. Just maybe switch subjects for a little while. I think that's very important as well. The next piece we're thinking about here is, I think, a really important one. Some people might comment down below that reading is kind of like a form of procrastination. I've seen that many times because you're not making something, you're not maybe building a business, and you're not potentially creating a really great work. And to that, I actually would agree. I agree in large part that reading can be a form of procrastination, but so can making something. I think the important piece here to keep in mind is that if you're not building a question because you want to be optimizing to answer your life's great question, it's not going to be really something that you should be spending your time on. So what we're thinking about here is like, okay, life's great question coming from Tom Rath, really, really important, is like, what can I contribute? Right? We won't go through the whole entire quote together here, but I do recommend you check out the book. It's very, very interesting that the life's great question is like, what can I contribute? So if you're just reading just for your own benefit, that's totally okay. If you're just creating a business for your own benefit, that's totally okay. But if you want to take it to the next level, you want to think about how you're reading, how you're learning, how you're summarizing, you're synthesizing can help other people. And if reading is a part of that answer for you, and it is for me, then you should spend your time learning to get over these distractions and procrastination. I recommend that if you feel like you didn't get everything you needed out of this video, to go and check out all of the different more in-depth books. Definitely, I give you a really high-level overview of some of the techniques that you can follow to try and get over your procrastination. But the books and the summaries of those books will go into it a little bit more in depth, and I can give you more examples inside of that. Additionally, I really think that you'd be well served to watch my summary on how to take smart notes by Sanket Ahrens, because if you are kind of reading and summarizing and synthesizing as part of what you can contribute, it's a really helpful book. And it's going to show you how to use reading to accomplish your life's great work. So I really recommend that you check that out. If you're interested in finding out a little bit more about the tool and how you can get access to it, you can click the first link down below in the description. Again, I've got over 100 different books, 600 different ideas, and getting close to a dozen different explorations, and hundreds of different tools that you can access directly from a web browser with this tool. I hope to see you in the next video, and I hope to see you inside of the YouTube channel membership if you're interested in using this tool in your own work. Thank you.